She left me on the table, not in the literal sense. There was no operating room, no surgical light burning over my face, no mass team watching my pulse on a monitor. But by 3 in the morning, the distinction had become too small to matter. My name is Michael Brooks. I was 33 years old then, and I was an architect. I made my living designing things that were supposed to stand under pressure. Beams, columns, foundations, walls. Structures that carried weight without announcing the effort. I was good at it. Until about 6 hours before my marriage ended, I was also the husband of Dr. Emily Carter, one of the most respected cardiothoracic surgeons at St. Winifred General. She was precise, brilliant, disciplined, and terrifyingly composed. She was the kind of woman people lower their voices around, not because she demanded it, but because she made carelessness feel embarrassing. This is not a story about heartbreak. Heartbreak is too soft a word. It suggests a clean fracture, something human and warm, something that happens because love was once alive enough to break. What Emily did felt more clinical. It was an incision made with a steady hand. Efficient, accurate, possibly even necessary. But no anesthesia was given because she had simply forgotten that I could feel pain. I had been admitted to St. Winifred General after a cycling accident. It was not dramatic. No rainstorm, no high-speed collision, no cinematic skid across asphalt. A parked car door opened at exactly the wrong second, and my bicycle could not change the laws of physics fast enough. 2 cracked ribs, a long cut along my left side that needed stitches, moderate blood loss, bruising that bloomed like dark weather under the skin. The attending doctor told me I had been lucky. I called Emily from the ambulance. She answered on the 3rd ring. Michael. Her voice was already in motion. I could hear cloth shifting, a door closing, the sharp background rhythm of a hospital corridor. I'm in an ambulance, I said. They're taking me to St. Winifred. For 1 second, there was nothing, then another. Which in trance? I told her. She said something away from the phone, muffled, quick. Something like, I have to go. I thought she meant she had to leave wherever she was and come to me. She did not come. Room 407 was ordinary in a way that became memorable because I had nothing else to look at. A north-facing window, a television mounted too high on the wall, and 4-line ticking beside me with the slow patience of a clock that had no sympathy. I am, by temperament and by profession, a patient man. Architects have to be. You spend months turning an idea into drawings, then more months watching empty ground refuse to become the thing you imagined. You learn to live inside the distance between intention and reality. So I waited. 3 hours passed before I called her again. This time she answered immediately. Michael, how are you? Are you stable? The attending spoke to you, I said. A pause. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. Emily's silences had always had architecture. They were not empty. They carried weight. I wanted to make sure you were being cared for, she said. Where are you? Another pause. A different load this time. I'm still at the hospital. This hospital? Yes. She was in the building. Somewhere under the same roof, in the same institution, breathing the same processed hospital air. My wife had decided not to come to room 407. I want to be exact about what happened inside me then. It was not fury. It was not devastation. It was colder, smaller, and more permanent than either of those. It was understanding, not the kind that arrives with thunder, but the kind that clicks quietly into place like a lock turning from the other side of a door. Okay, I said. That was all. 1 word. I meant every letter. I placed the phone face down on the bedside table and looked through the north-facing window for a long time. Later, I learned where she had been. 3 floors below, in the cardiac consultation wing, Dr. Emily Carter had been sitting with a man named Nathan Parker, her former boyfriend, the man she had dated for 4 years before me. On the rare occasion she mentioned him, she described him as a chapter that ended. Nothing more. No viternis. No affection. Just a closed file. Nathan had been admitted earlier that evening after a cardiac episode. Arrhythmia. Serious enough to require monitoring, but manageable. He was not dying. He was not even her patient. She had formally transferred his care to another attending physician. But she stayed. She stayed with him while I was bleeding 3 floors above her. Rule 1. Though I did not yet know I was writing rules. Information only destroys you when you receive it before you are ready. Collect it. File it. Use it when you are. Morning came the way mornings come after sleepless nights. Not mercifully, not triumphantly, just inevitably. Daniel Hayes arrived at 7:15 with coffee in one hand and his coat half-buttoned. Daniel was 35, my senior partner at the firm, and one of the few people I knew who could not physically bring himself to show up anywhere empty-handed. He took one look at me and said, "Who died?" "Nobody," I said. "That's part of the problem." He sat in the visitor's chair without asking. He handed me the coffee. He did not demand an explanation. That was one of the reasons I trusted Daniel. He understood the difference between a moment that needed questions and a moment that needed someone to sit down and stay. I drank the coffee. It was too sweet. Daniel had ordered my coffee too sweet for 4 years because of a mistake he made once and never corrected. I had never told him because it never seemed important enough. "Strange what you let pass." "She was in the building," I said finally. Not a story, not an accusation, just a fact placed on the table. Daniel's jaw tightened for half a second. "Nathan Parker was admitted last night." I asked. He said nothing. Cardiac, still nothing. "She stayed with him." Daniel looked at the floor. Then he looked back at me. "What are you going to do?" The answer did not require thought. I had been awake all night doing nothing but thinking. By the time Daniel asked, the answer had already been folded, labeled, and filed. "I'm getting discharged," I said. "Then I'm going home. I'm going to find the papers. And I'm going to sign them." His expression shifted. "Divorce papers?" "We had them drafted 2 months ago." I stopped myself before explaining the argument that led to them. It no longer mattered. "She asked for them," I said. "I told her we should think." "I've thought." "You're sure?" "I've been sure longer than I admitted." Daniel set his coffee down and stood. "I'll drive you." The apartment was ours legally, but that was only the paperwork. In every meaningful way, it belonged to Emily. It had been furnished by her taste, arranged according to her habits, and maintained by her system of order. I had moved into her life the way a tenant moves into a finished space. I had not changed the layout. I had only added myself where there was room. Standing there that morning, sore ribs wrapped under my shirt, I noticed details I had trained myself not to see. There were photographs of us, but every one of them had been chosen and placed by Emily. None of my sketches were framed, though I had offered twice. Near the door was a key rack with 4 hooks, but only 2 keys, hers and mine. Beside them, only her car keys occupied the little shelf. Small things, almost geological, evidence that forms a pattern only when you finally decide to read the layers. I found the divorce documents in the home office. Her home office, really. My drafting table sat in one corner, but the desk, the filing cabinets, the precise administrative discipline of the room belonged to her. The folder was in the 3rd drawer. Manila, labeled in Emily's immaculate handwriting. Administrative. Marriage. That was when Rule 2 arrived. When someone has already organized your ending, have the grace to execute it cleanly. I carried the folder to the kitchen table. I made coffee the way I actually liked it. French press, slightly bitter, steeped 2 minutes longer than recommended. Then I sat down and read every page. The terms were fair, cleaner than fair, more generous than the law would have required. Emily had assigned me half the apartment's equity, though she had contributed more to the down payment. She made no claim against my business accounts. She had been thorough. In the least important way, she had been kind. I stared at her signature on page 7. She had already signed. Weeks earlier, probably. The only missing thing had been my hand. So I signed. My signature has never been impressive. Architects learn to letter clearly, but my actual signature looks like a man still deciding whether to commit to the line. That morning, it suited me. I put the pen down and drank my coffee. It was 8:47 a.m. I had been married to Dr. Emily Carter for 3 years and 2 months. I ended the marriage over French press coffee at a kitchen table that had always felt too formal for anything so human. Outside, the city continued without consulting me. Delivery trucks, distant traffic, a dog barking somewhere, the hard percussion of thousands of lives moving forward. I refilled my cup, and I thought, what now? It did not feel like a question. It felt like a door opening. Emily came home at noon. I heard her key turn in the lock, and my body responded before my mind did. A small internal shift, like a gauge needle moving. 3 years of conditioning. It would take time to recalibrate. I was sitting on the sofa. The folder lay on the coffee table between us. Her signature was already inside it. Mine had joined it. She saw the folder immediately. Emily was a diagnostician. She saw everything. "Michael," she said. "The coffee is fresh," I said. "I made enough." She crossed the room slowly and sat in the armchair opposite me, not beside me. I noticed that. She never sat beside me on the sofa during difficult conversations. She chose the chair where distance could do part of the work. "You signed them," she said. "I did." I was going to explain. "You don't have to." "Michael." "Emily." I said her name gently once. "I'm not angry." That made her look at me properly. With the sharp, focused attention she gave to scans that did not match the expected diagnosis. "He could have died," she said at last. "His arrhythmia was—" "He didn't die," I said. "The attending confirmed it when he discharged me this morning." She absorbed that. "You were discharged this morning?" "Early. Daniel drove me." "You should have called." "I did." There was no bitterness in my voice. I was genuinely curious in the way one is curious about a theorem that fails at the final step. She did not answer. The silence between us was not awkward. My ribs hurt. The doctor had said 4 to 6 weeks, and I had filed that under inconvenient. The firm was deep into a municipal commission, a public library in Mapo. A project like that comes around maybe once in a decade. It either becomes the work people remember you for, or the work your career spends years recovering from. I had been lead architect for 11 months. I was not letting fractured ribs take that from me. My assistant, Olivia Reed, was 26, ruthlessly efficient, and incapable of missing relevant information. She had noticed my marital status changing before I had announced anything, mostly because Emily's name had disappeared from my calendar. At 9:17, Olivia placed coffee on my desk without being asked. "Black. No sugar. The structural report is open on your screen," she said. "The Mapo contractor wants to move Thursday's meeting to Friday." "Tuesday," I said. "I'll tell them Tuesday." She left without asking how I was. That was one of Olivia's gifts. She knew that I did not always need to be invited to discuss my pain. Sometimes I needed competent people to keep the room standing. The day moved. I reviewed drawings. I argued usefully with the contractor's engineer about load calculations. I ate lunch at my desk. I went approximately 6.5 hours without thinking about Emily, which seemed respectable for day 3. At 4:30, Daniel knocked on my office door and entered without waiting. As senior partner, he had to write. As Daniel, he lacked the patience for ceremonial pauses. He sat across from me. "People are going to notice," he said. "People notice everything," I said, most of it incorrectly. "You and Emily share a circle. St. Winifred attendings. Their spouses. The Riverside Charity Dinner Circle." "I know. She'll set the story before you do." I looked at him. "What story do you suggest I set?" He considered it. "A better one." "Agreed," I said. "Now show me the East Wall variants before I have to look at them alone." Shared social circles are rarely shared. They are territories, some borders marked, others understood. After a separation, whoever moves first redraws the map. For 3 years, I had orbited Emily's professional world. Hospital dinners, charity galas, expensive restaurant gatherings where the tasting menu cost more than a month of rent in some neighborhoods. I had been pleasant. I had been appropriate. I had functioned as Dr. Carter's architect husband. It was not an insulting role. It simply had very little to do with me. The person who changed that was Sarah Miller. Sarah was 31, a cardiovascular researcher at the same hospital. Technically Emily's colleague, though colleague implies a nearness Emily rarely allowed. Sarah and I had spoken maybe 7 times over 3 years, always at the edge of other people's events. The conversations had been unusually substantial. My library project, her clinical trial methods, once a long argument about whether brutalism could be defended ethically as a design movement. She argued that it could. I liked that. She called me on Thursday on my direct line. "Michael Brooks," she said. "This is awkward, and I'm going to acknowledge that immediately because I dislike pretending not to understand context." "Sarah Miller," I said. "Hello." "I heard," she said. "I'm not calling about that. Or rather, I'm calling because what I heard was too neat." "Too neat." I heard one version. I have professional experience with biased data sets. You want the other version. I want coffee with someone who can argue intelligently about brutalism, she said. If the truthful version of recent events happens to come with that, I won't object. I paused. Tomorrow, I said. There's a place near Mapo that does proper pour-over. I know it. 1 o'clock. She hung up first. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment and realized that, for the first time in a week, something new had happened. Not a consequence. Not a continuation. Something that had not existed before and now did. Rule 4. New things are not replacements. They belong to their own category. The cafe near Mapo was called Maru. Low ceiling, exposed concrete, pour-over bar along one wall. A place where nobody performed comfort because nobody needed to. Sarah arrived 4 minutes early and sat across from me without the elaborate social padding people often use when a meeting is complicated. Before anything else, she said, I am not here representing anyone. I am not gathering information for anyone. I am here as a civilian. Understood. Also, the coffee here is excellent, and I've wanted to come back since March. I liked her immediately. I had liked her before, but then the feeling had been careful and bounded. She had been my wife's colleague. I had been her colleague's husband. The structure required distance. That structure no longer existed. What version did you hear? I asked. She held her cup in both hands. That you ended the marriage abruptly after Emily spent the night supporting a critically ill former patient. That she has handled it professionally but is understandably shaken. That you were unavailable to her during a crisis. That, I said slowly, is an impressive piece of architecture. I thought so. The load-bearing parts are real. They've just been attached to a different building. We looked at each other. Sarah, I realized, read the geometry of situations too. She looked for the angle that did not meet. The night Emily was at the hospital, I said, I was also at the hospital. I know. Room 407. Daniel filed the accident report through your firm's insurance. Nathan Parker was her patient, transferred. Officially, she removed herself from his care. Unofficially, she remained present for several hours. Sarah chose words the way a researcher handles evidence. Only what could be supported. They have history, she added. Most of the department knows it. No one asks Emily directly. No, I said. She would not allow that. No, Sarah agreed. She's good at a different kind of architecture. I almost smiled. Almost. The wound was still too close for a real smile, but the almost existed, and I noticed. We talked for 2 hours. After the first 15 minutes, not about Emily. We discussed the library, public space, clinical trial design, whether any building could ever be neutral or whether form was always an argument. When I left, I realized I had not noticed my ribs since the moment Sarah sat down. The social restructuring began, as these things usually do, through small acts that pretend not to be acts. The architecture world is smaller than it looks. The annual Urban Design Gallery opening was an event I had attended for 6 years. First alone, then as Emily's husband, and now alone again in a way that felt more accurate than either previous version. Everyone in the room knew me. More precisely, everyone knew me as an architect. That distinction had blurred during my marriage. I had entered Emily's world dressed as her husband, and then walked into my own world still wearing the costume. My peers had accepted it politely and looked for me behind it. I had not always been present enough to be found. That night, I was present. At 9, across the gallery, I saw Nathan Parker. He had not come as part of the architecture community. He arrived with a marketing director from a development firm, someone connected to clients. He looked exactly as recovered as a man who had never truly been near death. I studied him with the detached attention I might give a competitor's portfolio. Handsome, polished, the kind of face that made people want to believe good things before they asked for proof. And with a clarity that did not require anger, I understood what Emily had seen, and what she had chosen. Nathan's gaze found mine. He held it for a second, then 2. A social test, measuring temperature. He gave me the faintest professional nod. I returned it with equal precision. Then I turned back to my conversation with the Deputy Director of Urban Planning. Rule 5. Do not give the person who hurt you the gift of your reaction. Keep it. Spend it somewhere useful. After the gallery, I walked home through Mapo. My ribs were improving. For weeks out, the sharp pain had softened into a dull reminder. September had settled over the city, cool and dark, smelling of concrete losing the day's heat and leaves beginning to turn. For the first time in years, I felt unoccupied. I do not mean lonely. I mean I had access to all the rooms inside myself. The Maple Library still needed one crucial decision. The east-facing reading wall had been specified as glass curtain paneling. It was beautiful on paper, but simulation data showed afternoon glare that would ruin the room's purpose. I had been circling the problem for 3 weeks. The solution arrived not as inspiration, but as good solutions usually do, while I was thinking about something else. I was making French press coffee one morning and watching autumn light enter the kitchen when I realized the issue was not the glass. It was the angle. If the reading alcoves rotated 9 degrees away from the south wall, they would catch morning light and avoid the afternoon glare. 9 degrees. Small enough to sound trivial. Large enough to change everything. It required revising the structural plan, which required the contractor to speak to engineers, which required the city to approve 2 additional weeks. The contractor complained professionally. Then he agreed. The city commission signed off. 2 weeks. A small victory. People underestimate small victories. They're the actual texture of a life beginning to work again. Not ribbon cuttings. Not speeches. The day you solve the glare problem, and a room becomes what you meant it to be. Sarah brought lunch to the studio that Thursday. It was not romantic, or not primarily. She had texted that she would be nearby for a meeting, and if she was already buying food for herself, buying food for 2 created no meaningful logistical burden. I was learning this about her. Warmth disguised as efficiency. Care wrapped in practical language. She sat in Olivia's chair while Olivia was at lunch, eating while studying the library model. The reading alcoves, she said. They're turned away from the wall. 9 degrees. For the light. For the glare. She considered that. So instead of blocking the thing causing harm, you changed the angle at which the room received it. I set down my chopsticks. Yes, I said. She looked at me then, and we were not talking only about the library. 9 degrees is a small rotation, she said. It's enough. She nodded and returned to her food. A slight curve appeared at the corner of her mouth, directed at the model rather than at me. I appreciated that. Sarah knew the difference between saying something and performing it. She had built a life on distinctions that mattered. By 6 weeks after the separation, Emily's version of events had settled into the St. Winifred social circle. I had ended things suddenly. She had handled it with grace. We had grown apart. The timing had been unfortunate. She had been supporting a seriously ill former patient. I did not correct anyone. I did not offer a counterstory. I was elsewhere, in other rooms, building other things. I knew the shape of the circulating narrative because Daniel attended one of those dinners and reported back. He called it reconnaissance. I called it friendship performed for someone too dignified to spy on his own behalf. She says it was amicable. He told me the next morning over coffee I had finally told him to stop ordering too sweet. He had looked genuinely betrayed when I confessed it. She says you both agreed the timing wasn't right, Daniel continued, that you were growing in different directions. Different directions, I repeated. Her words. And Nathan, he was there with the marketing director. He and Emily spoke naturally, as colleagues. Daniel paused. Naturally, in the way people speak naturally when they have practiced it. He's stable, I said. The cardiac episode was manageable from the start. Arrhythmia responsive to medication. Admitted and discharged within 48 hours. You knew that. The attending summary came through. Courtesy copy, because I was admitted the same night. Same floor. And you said nothing. To whom? I asked. The people who want her version will keep it. That is their right. I do not need them. The people who matter understand the geometry. Daniel turned his cup in his hands. She's applying for department head, he said. Cardiothoracic. Current head retires in March. I took that in. Good, I said. She's qualified. He looked at me as if I had spoken in a language he was still learning. I mean it, I said. She's an excellent surgeon. She should have the position. Rule 6. Give credit to what is true, even when the source is complicated. Clear sight is a discipline. October arrived with the sharp clarity of autumn, the kind of northern air that makes the city look newly drawn, every edge defined. The library entered its final review phase. The reading room rotation had been approved. The east wall was being finished. I had walked the site every Tuesday for 11 months. By then, I read the building the way one reads a complex text. Slowly at first, then fluently. Eventually, not reading at all, just understanding. That Tuesday, I found Sarah on site. It was not planned, or at least not confessed as planned. She had a contact on the city's public space committee. She had mentioned once that she was interested in how civic spaces influence population health, and she had arranged an official site visit. On the same Tuesday, I always walked the site. "You planned this," I said. She looked up from her notebook. "I planned a site visit." The date was not influenced by prior knowledge of your schedule. She paused. "I may have asked Olivia when you usually come." I looked at her for a moment. Then I showed her the building. That is not a small thing. A building before completion is intimate. It has not yet begun performing for the public. It has no finished skin, no furniture, no people softening the facts of it. The bones are visible. Every decision can still be seen. I had never shown anyone a project at that stage except Daniel, and Daniel worked on it. Sarah and I walked the whole space. She asked questions like a researcher, not to flatter me, but because she was testing real hypotheses. How did I know the rotation would work? What had I expected to sacrifice by changing the plan late? Would visitors understand why the alcoves were angled, or would they simply feel it? "Feel it," I said. "Most people will just feel it. Is that enough?" It's more than enough. Feeling something real is harder than understanding something clever. I want the room to be felt. She lowered her notebook and looked at me. "It will be," she said. "Quiet. Certain." We stood in the unfinished light for a while, and neither of us hurried away. In November, the official filing confirmation arrived. The divorce had been registered. Michael Brooks and Emily Carter were, in every legal and administrative sense, separate entities. The email came at 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday, between the East Wall review and a call with the commissioner's office. I read it once, filed it, added a note to the administrative folder on my desktop. Filing complete. November 7th. Then I took the call, which ran long and usefully, and I did not let myself return to the email until the day's work was done. At 6:30, the studio was empty. I opened the message again. 3 years and 2 months. I try to make an honest accounting. Not grief. Not blame. Something structural. What had the marriage been? What remained of its materials? I was better at scheduling because of Emily. Her hours and demands had forced me to become efficient with my own. Through her events, I had met parts of Daniel's extended network and built from there. I had watched someone perform at the highest level of her field, close enough to understand what excellence required and what it cost. Professionally, Emily had been exemplary. Personally, she had treated me with the same organized care she brought to everything else. Efficient, thorough, ultimately designed around her own system. I had fit into her structure. When I stopped fitting, or when Nathan reappeared and fit into an older structure better, she processed the change with minimal disruption. I could not even be angry at the consistency of it. Emily had always valued what she had built more than what she had been given. I had been given to her. Nathan had been built with her years before me. Some histories become geological in people who do not easily demolish what they once made. I closed the email. Then I opened the library drawings. Rule 7, build the next thing. The Riverside Public Library opened on December 14th. There is a particular quality to the moment a building receives its first public. I had been present for 3 openings by then, and every time, the shock was the same. Something that began in your head, then lived only in drawings, then in steel and concrete, becomes inhabited, used, altered by presence. In that instant, it stops belonging entirely to you. The city commissioner gave speech. The head of urban planning gave one too. Daniel stood beside me and said nothing, which was the right decision. The speeches described the building in terms that were accurate to its stated goals and approximately related to its actual nature. Then the doors opened. People entered. I saw an old man step into one of the reading alcoves. The light was there. I had designed that angle, that specific wash of winter morning at that precise time of year. I had designed it for someone I would never meet, someone who would never know I had stood in the kitchen at 7 in the morning with bitter coffee and solved the problem by 9 degrees. He stood in the light for maybe 40 seconds. Then he moved on. 40 seconds was enough. Sarah found me near the exhibit in the lobby, where the city had displayed drawings and construction photographs. She was looking at the original east wall plan beside the revised version. "This is the one," she said. "Yes. It looks so small on paper. 9 degrees is small. It changes everything." She turned from the drawing and looked at me. The lobby had the best light in the building. I had specified it that way. A tall north-facing window that caught winter sky without glare. "Michael," she said. It was the first time she used my first name without any formal distance. "Sarah," I said. She smiled. "Small. Real. Buy me coffee after this?" "Yes." There's a kind of reckoning that happens without confrontation. Time applies pressure to an accurate record, and structures reveal what they can actually bear. I did not plan it. I did not engineer it. I waited with an architect's patience for other people's stories to behave according to their real load-bearing capacity. The cardiothoracic department head position was announced in February. The committee reviewed candidates. By objective measures, Emily was the strongest. The attending who managed Nathan Parker's cardiac case had filed a protocol complaint. Not against Emily as a person, exactly. Against the informal consultation arrangement. A senior physician had provided unpaid, unofficial support adjacent to a transferred patient outside proper oversight channels. A protocol issue. The kind hospitals care about very much when deciding who should hold administrative authority. "She'll survive it," I said. "It won't disqualify her forever." "No," Sarah said. "She's too good at the actual work." But the position went to Dr. Howard. He's 62. He'll retire in 2 years. She'll be the obvious candidate then. 2 years matters. Yes. I sat with that. "She'll use them well," I said finally. Sarah studied me. "You're not pleased." An observation, not an accusation. "No. Why not?" I thought about the honest answer. Because she hurt me through bad judgment, not lack of skill. Watching her judgment questioned publicly does not repair what happened. Sarah was quiet. "What would repair it?" "Nothing external," I said. "That's the answer. It's already repaired." She reached across the table and placed one hand over mine. Briefly, factually, warm without performance. Then she picked up her coffee and returned to arguing that Zaha Hadid's organic forms represented a meaningful rupture from brutalism. I argued they were a sophisticated continuation. We argued for an hour. Neither conceded. I was learning that this was the texture of us. And I found, without reservation, that I was more comfortable than I had been in years. In March, a new commission arrived. Private client, tech sector, serious resources. The kind of brief that does not come through public tender, but through referral, which means your reputation has traveled farther than you have. It was for a mixed-use residential and research facility in Seongsu. The client wanted integrated design that supported resident health, focus, and cognitive well-being, citing recent research on environmental cognition and spatial health. I read that line twice. Then I called Sarah. "I need a research consultant," I said when she answered. "Good morning. Good morning. I need a research consultant on spatial well-being for a commission." A pause. "This is a professional inquiry." "Yes. Paid. Obviously. I want input on structural decisions, too. That is not how architecture firms work. I'll convince you otherwise. Send me the brief." She did convince me. Not on all structural decisions, but she became central to the environmental design specifications. The conversations that followed were among the most productive of my career because Sarah approached every question with the same discipline. What does the evidence say? And what do we know we do not know yet? Rule 8. Find a person who tells you what you do not know. Keep them close. The commission was signed in April. The East Bank research residence would take 2 years. I did the geometry of that with quiet pleasure. 2 years of this. One early April morning, I was alone in the studio. Commission drawings covered 3 tables. I made French press coffee 2 minutes too long and stood by the window as the city began waking. I thought about the ambulance, the phone call, room 407 and its north-facing window. I thought about the kitchen table at 8:47 a.m. I thought about the folder labeled administrative. Marriage. I thought about Daniel's too sweet coffee, the gallery, the old man standing 40 seconds in the reading alcove light. I thought about 9-degree rotations. Small. Enough. The last time I saw Emily was not dramatic. It was a Thursday afternoon in May at Han River Park near Dongjak Bridge. I had gone there for no important reason. Sometimes I walked there when I needed to think about distance, about the way a river can be always moving and always the same. She was coming from the opposite direction. That is how things end in real life. Without staging. She wore civilian clothes, white linen shirt, dark slacks, hair down. With the honesty the moment required, I noticed she looked exactly as she always had. Measured, precise, beautiful in an architectural way. A face composed of intentional lines. She saw me almost when I saw her. The path was wide enough that neither of us had to stop. We both knew that. She did not take the wider path. Neither did I. We met in the middle at an ordinary walking pace and stopped. The river continued beside us, indifferent and constant. Michael, she said. Emily, I said. The formality had returned. Clean, precise. You look well, she said. You too. I meant it. She did. A pause opened between us. The river made its low, continuous sound, the music of moving water that does not require acknowledgement to continue. The library, she said. I visited last month. What did you think? She considered it. The reading alcoves. The light in them. Yes. I stood in one longer than I meant to. I nodded. For another moment, we stood as two people who had once shared a structure and now shared only the knowledge of what had been built and what it had cost. Take care of yourself, she said. You too, I said. She walked south toward the bridge. I continued north. The river ran between us, parallel to both paths, carrying everything in one direction. I did not look back, not because it would have been dramatic not to, because there was nothing behind me I needed to see. The East Bank research residence broke ground in August. There's a photograph from that day. Daniel took it without announcing himself, which is usually the only way to get a photograph worth keeping. In it, Sarah and I stand on the cleared site wearing hard hats that fit neither of us properly. We are both looking at the empty ground. She's saying something. My head is turned toward her. I'm listening with my whole body. That photograph sits on my desk. It is the only photograph there. Rule 9, the last rule for now. The things you build from the right materials for the right reasons, with the right person beside you arguing honestly about every specification, those are the things that hold. In September, 1 year to the month after the ambulance, I moved. Not far. Still Mapo. Still near the library. A different apartment. Smaller. Higher floor. Chosen entirely by me. There are drafting sketches on the walls. The coffee maker is a French press. The furniture is angular because I like angular furniture. The key rack by the door has 3 hooks. 2 keys hang there. Mine. And one I had cut for Sarah and given to her without ceremony. She took it without ceremony and clipped it onto her existing keychain. We agreed, not aloud, but in the kind of agreement that happens between two people who communicate mostly through precision, that this was sufficient. The central question was never why Emily did it. I understood why. She had an older structure inside her that she had never fully demolished. When it appeared again, she returned to it without first doing the work that return required. The real question was always this. What do you build after? The answer, it turns out, is the same for anyone who builds for a living. You study the failure. You revise the plans. You rotate 9 degrees away from the thing that was causing harm. You find the person who will argue honestly with you about every specification. And then you break ground. And then you break ground again. The rules are simple. Rule 1. Information only destroys you when you receive it before you are ready. Collect it. File it. Use it when you are. Rule 2. When someone has already organized your ending, have the grace to execute it cleanly. Rule 3. Disappear before anyone expects you to. Absence can tell a more interesting story than presence. Rule 4. New things are not replacements. They belong to their own category. Rule 5. Do not give the person who hurt you the gift of your reaction. Keep it. Spend it somewhere useful. Rule 6. Give credit to what is true, even when the source is complicated. Clear sight is a discipline. Rule 7. Build the next thing. Rule 8. Find the person who tells you what you do not know. Keep them close. Rule 9. The things you build from the right materials for the right reasons, with the right person beside you arguing honestly about every specification, those are the ones that hold.